Welcome everyone to the AAAS If Then Ambassadors. Well, the panelists today will share with you how they have been able to navigate through the STEM and technology workforce. And with that, each of the panelists comes from a different educational background, diversity within workforce, whether in industry, academia, all of those things. And they will also share with you strategies that they use to be successful within STEM. I'm up first. I'm your moderator for today, and I am a machine learning expert at North Carolina Central University. I use machine learning to work with autonomous vehicles and understanding the reliability of them, and also in doing research on misinformation. I am a 3-time HBCU graduate from Winston-Salem State University, also from North Carolina Central University, where I currently work now as an assistant professor. And I'm a graduate of North Carolina A&T State University, where I became the first woman to obtain a PhD in computer science. I also enjoy reading, cooking, and spending time with my family. Here's your first panelist, Kim Sweenen. She is a senior software engineer at Google. She's currently a back-end engineer on Google Arts and Culture, and before that worked on YouTube. And before becoming an engineer, she actually was a professional actress. So you may have seen her on True Blood, Chuck, Gilmore Girls, and Mad Men. She also holds a Bachelor of Arts in Theater Studies from Yale, a Master of Arts in Classical Acting, and a Master of Science in Computer Science. Your next panelist is Gracie Ermey. She is a research software engineer that does machine learning at Vulcan Incorporated. She builds machine learning platforms to support wildlife research. And some of this includes African elephants, sharks, and rays, killer whales, and bottlenose dolphins. She holds a Bachelor of Science and Master of Science in Computer Science from Western Washington University. And Gracie is also an avid knitter, and she makes the most beautiful things. Trust me, you must follow her. And she has made 8 sweaters since the beginning of this pandemic. Next, we have Nicole Jackson, who is a Chief Technology Officer at Do It Health, and she leads technical strategy and drives technology vision for mobile and web applications in the development of health IT. In the process, she's currently in the process of completing her EDD in learning technologies, focusing on the mind, brain, and learning. She has a Master of Science in Creativity and Innovation and has an interdisciplinary Bachelor of Arts degree. Before her career in STEM, she served in the military. She is an avid reader, cellist, and creative. And our last panelist is Afua Bruce. She is a Chief Program Officer at DataKind. She works with volunteers from all over the world to use data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to help governmental agencies. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Engineering from Purdue University and an MBA from the University of Michigan. She enjoys cooking, baking, and indoor gardening. So what do I and all of the panelists have in common? We are right now serving as role models for STEM through the AAAS If Then initiative. And I think that you're going to find the insights today very valuable. I have already taken the liberty of seeing the questions that you've placed in the Wahoo app, and those will be incorporated into the panel discussion today. And we're going to go ahead and begin. And I think it may be best to stop this so you can see your panelist's face. If that's possible, Jaya, to pin us so that everybody can just see those who are speaking. If you can pin the panelists. I'm going to start with Kim and Nicole. My first question, and either one of you can start, is how has your diverse background been a strength for you in your field? And this is for Nicole first, and then Kim to follow.
Okay. It's interesting. I just had a really similar conversation with a student the other day about the benefits of having served in the military and the benefits of having interdisciplinary education and what that's brought to the table as far as leadership, as far as creating things. And I think that more than anything, I've really started to observe the world in a series of systems and understanding different roles and different actors within them and understanding their interplay of how we work off of each other and what that means in technology. And so it's a great irony to kind of see how the arts had a really big role in that, and understanding like what it's like to play with the orchestra and how we all play off of each other. And then understanding systems that we're building and how all of us as users of systems, we built for you first. And the instrument just happens to be a piece of technology. It's a mobile phone, it's a web application. It's just, I think it's really transformed the way I understand what I'm building and who I'm building for, because I first understand the actors. And I think that's probably the best answer there.
Cool. And I would say similarly, actually, I think having a background in creative arts has meant that or having just a different background from a lot of engineers, I think means that I think I come with just a different perspective on problems, because I've had a totally different life experience, totally different educational experience. And so like when faced with a standard sort of computer science problem, my brain doesn't necessarily go down the same routes as people who've been educated in that for a lot longer. And I would say the other thing is, I've always felt weird about the term soft skills, because it sort of implies that it's like, you can have them or not. And I think what I've come to realize is that like my training in being able to present to an audience, my training in being able to like write an essay and organize my thoughts and present them clearly and present things, change tacks if I realize my audience isn't with me. Like those kinds of awarenesses, I think have really helped me as an engineer, because it means that I can write really clear design documents. I can communicate my ideas very clearly in a meeting. And that turns out is absolutely necessary in order to have buy-in and collaboration. And since you kind of discover nothing gets built alone. So those human-based skills, I think, are actually really critical.
Thank you. Do any of the other ladies have something to add? If not, I'll move on to the next question. All right, this next question is for Gracie and Afua. What advice would you give young people considering a career in STEM? And Gracie, we'll start with you.
Okay, sounds good. First of all, hi everyone. I'm excited to be here with all of you today. So something that I have found to be something I'm still learning how to do truthfully, but also that I try to remember and try to tell young people who are wanting to consider a career in STEM is just to stay true to yourself. And I feel like I've learned a lot of the importance of this from like my fellow panelists here, and being part of the If Then ambassadorship, just seeing such a wide variety of people who are in STEM, like a much more diverse group of scientists and engineers than I usually see. They all have really embraced themselves as, who they are and everything about themselves, and that's made them successful in their field. And I feel like a lot of the times, society wants to kind of make us fit a mold of like what a tech professional is and what they look like and what they're interested in. And I feel like I'm given advice all the time, career advice from well-meaning people, but it's important to figure out what of that advice is going to actually help you get to where you want to go, and what of it is like kind of trying to make you change who you are to fit that certain mold, that they're used to seeing in tech. And so navigating that has been hard, but I think trying to stay true to yourself and what you actually want to do and where you want to go is like so important, and kind of helps. If you can remember that, it kind of can be your North Star as you're navigating what advice you should take and what advice you should kind of say no thank you to.
Mm-hmm. And I would just echo everything that Gracie said. I think it's really important to be able to know who you are and to stay true to yourself. The other bit of advice that I would give people who are considering careers in STEM is something you've probably heard a few times before, which is just don't give up. Classes can be really challenging. When you get in the workplace, people can be really challenging. Problems can be really challenging. You may feel like you are redoing the same line of code over and over. If you go a coding route or whatever you're tackling in the STEM areas. But once you decide that that's something you want to do, recognize that you have a specific value and you have something specific that only you can contribute. So just continue to work hard and don't give up.
Thank you. This next question is for everyone, and this is from the Wahuva app. It says, how can we make ourselves stand out to employers in the computing disciplines? And we can start with anyone. That's the question. I'll repeat it. How can we make ourselves stand out to employers in the computing disciplines?
So I'll tell you what I look for. People who are self-learners. That's a really, really big attribute for me personally. I like people who are self-guided and believe in self-discovery when they're learning. So I'm really excited if someone comes along for an interview and they say, hey, I just picked up this random skill set, or I'm taking this random class because I was curious. Their curiosity is exciting to me because then they can articulate to me why they're interested in that. And every single thing that Kim said earlier today explains exactly why that's a really, really important thing. Someone who can articulate how they're feeling and thinking, someone who can get me excited about an idea, someone who could bring that forward, tells me that they drive value on a team. So if there's no other skill set, I think self-discovery and self-learning is everything.
And I would piggyback on that and say that I always light up a little when I see someone who's like, wait, I didn't understand that. Like, I want to get that. Tell me more, right? So that desire to, it's building on top of curiosity, and it's willing to sort of like chase down an understanding of something. I think that is a trait that will take you far and will stand out when it comes to employers.
This also is for everyone as well. What has been one of your biggest challenges so far in the tech workforce? What's been your biggest challenge? And Gracie, we'll start with you, and then we'll follow with Nicole.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been a pretty consistent challenge, just trying to be taken seriously as an engineer. A lot of it has to do with like, I haven't been in very many teams where there are a lot of other early career sort of people. It's been a lot of very senior engineers that I've worked the most closely with, and often the only woman on a team as well. And so just going into an environment where you're where you're a lot younger, you're a lot less experienced, is like, it's hard to prove that, you know, you have value to contribute and to like change their minds if they have any sort of judgments about you just based on, you know, how you look and what what your experience level is. And so I've been lucky to work with like a lot of really collaborative people who definitely have given me, you know, the chance to prove myself, but just the fact that you even have to prove yourself is like something that is pretty frustrating to have to do. So yeah, that's probably been the biggest challenge for me.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is, you know, you mentioned early career, the same thing happens when you are more senior in your career. It's the same thing. So I think personally for me, it's been a combination of being from a traditional computer science background, right? So there's like getting over that hump, like, do you actually know what you're talking about? And then once we get past that, it's also you're a woman. And then when we get past that, also you're Black. And then we get past that, honestly, also I'm really short. So half the time when I'm in a meeting, they're like, you're only 4'10". I don't even know if I should be listening to you. I'm like, yeah, but you know, carry a big stick. So I mean, it's one of those things where it is troublesome sometimes to kind of go through this escalation of all the ways that I need to communicate something. But what I've learned more than anything is I mean what I say, and I say what I mean. And I don't always have to be right, because I'm really observant, very mindful, and I'm very attentive when I'm listening to a conversation. So I don't just jump in and say, this is what it is, because I said so, because whatever title, because titles don't really matter at the end of the day. Intelligence does, and your ability to listen. But, you know, I think the biggest thing has been knowing that I am very confident when I say something, that I've thought meaningfully about what you said, and this is my rebuttal. And I'm not negotiating on whether or not I mean what I say. So we can kind of do this thing, but I said what I said. And it's hard to do that when you're a woman. It's hard to do that, you know, being a Black woman especially, but it's hard to do that when you're a woman. So I can imagine, you know, everything you said about being in early career is hard there too. But everything that you said, what I just said to you, I'm talking to you right now, and the audience is having a listening. Remember these words, because you're going to need them as you escalate your career. Okay.
And for me, I'll just jump in here as well. I think for me, what I struggled with was finding the right types of positions that felt right to me. My undergraduate degree is in computer engineering. I worked at IBM all through undergrad, and for a few years after undergrad as well. And just in traditional software engineering jobs. But the disconnect between sort of traditional private sector software engineering and just my desire to really strengthen communities just never felt quite right. And so I worked really hard, and now my last several jobs, including where I am now, have been very community focused, working with nonprofits and government agencies to really strengthen communities. And so it took a while for me to figure out, how do I leverage my technical skills, my STEM skills, with some of my just passions and interests on sort of the tech for good side. But I'm really glad that I persevered and found that connection.
And I would say we've talked about other people doubting you, and I would throw in like doubting yourself, because that's probably been my biggest challenge. And I know imposter syndrome is a cliche term, but having come from, I got into computer science in my 30s. And so like doubting if I didn't understand something happening in the room, assuming that it was because I was somehow behind the curve. And it's been great through industry experience to come to realize, and being at a company like Google, where they sort of openly, everyone just sort of talks about their imposter syndrome, just sort of realize, oh, it's not that I'm somehow behind. It's just that the reality of being an engineer is you don't always have the answer right away, which is good, because otherwise it'd be really boring. So like your job is to go learn. And like Nicole was saying, like people who need to continue learning, that's actually the best kind of engineer. So anyway, but yeah, self-doubt, biggest challenge.
That was a great segue to our next question, but I just want to validate some of our audience. Nicole said she's short. I'm tall, and so that's a thing too. So either way it goes, can't please people. So that follows up with the next question is, have you ever encountered imposter syndrome, and what do you do when that happens? And so Afua, if you'll start us off this time, that would be great.
I'm now questioning myself, now that you've called on me first, for imposter syndrome.
No, you're fabulous. You're wonderful, and you deserve to be here. All of you, amazing women that inspired me.
Thank you. I certainly have encountered imposter syndrome multiple times in my career, multiple times in a day sometimes. But over the past year or two, I've actually begun to reframe it from imposter syndrome sort of as a negative thing, and just the recognition, to Kim's point, that as an engineer, you don't know everything the first time, and you don't always know the answer to questions that are posed to you. And the more complicated challenges that you work on, the more complicated, or in my case, politically fraught, shall we say, situations you get in, it's should be normal and expected to not quite know the right answer initially. If you go into those situations believing that you know the right answer, you're probably wrong anyway. And so I've tried to reframe it in my mind to help me combat imposter syndrome as a little bit of uncertainty and a little bit of questioning at the start in any new situation is normal and should be expected. And then just continue to work hard and focus, in my case, on what I do know and how I've been able to solve problems in the past, and reaching out to my network to help me make good informed decisions, and using that to really focus on the work to continue and push through.
Any others have any thoughts on imposter syndrome and how to get through it?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything Afua said is spot on. I mean, I don't know if it ever goes away, really, right? But I think just kind of reflecting and saying, all right, well, I know I don't know everything, but I do believe that I know enough about myself to learn, has been like the really critical thing. Like, I believe that I understand how to learn. And if I need assistance in understanding how I'm perceiving a problem and how I should position how I'm thinking, then when you call on those networks, just like you just said, they can kind of help you frame it based on a lens that you're trying to look through at that time. So that's basically how I've had to transition, because there's a whole lot of stuff people throw at me all the time. I was like, I have no idea what this is. Give me a half day. Let me go read. I will get back to you. And I'm totally comfortable with that, because I'm not going to know everything, because there's too much stuff going on in the world to even try to attempt to.
I would also say maybe not discounting like the positive signals that you're getting, that maybe it's just a voice in your head talking to you and not reality. So like I've had managers have to be like, oh my God, will you please listen to me? You're doing great. And I'm like, no, you don't know. Right. And they're like, how many times? So like, and just so having an appreciation of like, this is just my building up that confidence and starting to look at all the times that you have figured something out when you didn't know how to do it, and actually starting to build on top of that to that trust that no matter what that voice is telling you in that initial moment of, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening. Oh, but wait, this has happened before and I've actually worked through it before. And I have people who also believe in me and have seen me do it and know that I can do it and trust me to do it. And so I think that can help build it up as well.
Awesome. I'm going to use another one from the Wahoo app. And the question is, what are some of your best amplification tactics? So how do you let your voice be heard? Anybody want to take that one on?
Shakespeare monologues. No, I don't.
Nicole, did you want to start, try give us a shot, or Kim, or you ladies?
Go
Yeah.
ahead, Nicole.
So I'm pretty vocal. I don't really have a problem with that. I'm definitely a Jersey girl. So when I feel some kind of way, I let the whole world know it. But no, actually, it's been like I said, it's been a maturity thing I've learned over the years. I used to be real quick to like jump and say something because I felt like I had to say something in a moment. And I've definitely changed where I'm now more mindful, much more observant, and to make a decision on when I should say something and for what purpose, because the thing I say needs to bring some kind of value to the conversation, else why am I even talking? So I think in amplifying my voice, like socially, or amplifying my voice at work, or amplifying all those things, I think I've actually found that being super mindful about when I'm speaking, why I'm speaking, so that is very intentional, has been much more impactful than it was previously when I was just loud for the sake of being loud or whatever else. And so I think that's where I've been most effective. And I try to follow that even through social media. I don't really talk all the time, but when I do, I really have something to say. And so that's been how I've kind of navigated a lot of this professionally and also personally. And I think that that's pretty much when it gets people's attention, when you're actually saying, no, that's not a thing, or that is a thing, and this is how we work through it.
I would add, I joked about Shakespeare monologue, but there actually is like a great saying that they tell comedians, which is, don't ask for the laugh, expect the laugh. So the audience can tell if you're asking for a laugh and they're less likely to laugh, but if you just expect them to. And I think that carries over in like a whole bunch of fields. And so I think if you walk in a meeting room and you expect to be heard, you probably will be heard. But if you walk in feeling like you have to ask to be heard, that attitude alone is going to sort of signal that your voice is not as loud.
I like that. So confidence is key. That's really great. This is for everyone. The next question. What are the top 3 pieces of career advice that you have now in hindsight that you want to share? And this is from Wahoo as well. These are great questions. Keep them coming.
I can start. I think one of them is to build a really good mentor network. I think I certainly would not be where I am in my career if I didn't have people to give me honest feedback, both when I'm doing well and when, like, really out of line here, it's not correct. And so I think building a strong mentor network is really important. I think staying true to yourself is really important as well. And that often looks like going at your own pace and taking roles that are right for you specifically, as opposed to something Gracie touched on earlier as to what other people might think is right for you, or other people might think is right for someone with your background, or who wants to go into the field that you want to go into. And then finally, I think just have hobbies and don't let your job define you. And so really think about sort of what your passion is, and that's what drives you, as opposed to your identity being in a specific job. That then both gives you the flexibility to move around and change jobs or change organizations as needed, but also can really help you in maintaining a work-life balance or work-life integration, or whatever it needs to look like for you.
I'll go next. So first thing is really practical. I wish earlier in my career I would have skipped so many lunches. I spent a lot of time working through my lunch, and as a result, I think I was crabby a lot of times for a big part of my work week and a large part of my work day, and wasn't able to focus in the way I could have. I learned that early on. That's not a thing anymore. Which in other words just means take time for yourself personally. even throughout your day, because your work's always going to be there, and you don't want to be in a situation where you're burning yourself out for something that literally, if you wake up the next day, you could focus on it and you'd be much more clear. I think everything that you said, Afu, is spot on. I really like what you just said specifically about how we go through our process when we're in our careers, to understand the things that mean the most to us. I spent a lot of time doing exactly what someone told me to, and less time thinking about exactly who I was in the moment and what I was actually trying to become. And that's a critical distinction. I think that's like the last bit of advice here. Understand that the goal of where you're trying to go and what that means for you as a person, and align your career path to that without a title. Because half the titles that exist today literally did not exist yesterday. I've seen like 10 of them pop up and I have no idea what these jobs are. So don't worry about titles, because people make them up all the time and they just come and go. Worry about the path and worry about what you're going to be happy with. And then that thing will find you, because you will find it.
All right. So next, this question is a little bit different, but just to give our audience an idea of kind of what everybody on the panel is doing as a AAAS IFTHN ambassador. The question is, what outreach efforts have you done or that you're doing, and have you been able to see any of the impacts of that work? And we can start off with Gracie, and then Nicole, Kim, and Afua in that order.
Yeah. So this year has been, challenging in so many ways, but it's also brought about a lot of opportunities to do outreach with students that I wouldn't have normally had access to, just because we're all virtual now. So I've been really loving getting to talk to students all over the place, just about my job and how I got here and what my background is, and the cool ways that I am applying technology to wildlife conservation, because that connection is not was definitely not obvious to me before I had this job. So telling kids, if you like, no matter what your passion is, like, you can probably connect technology to that. If you're interested in learning to code, is never going to be something you'll regret doing. So just trying to encourage kids to keep their options open. So a lot of virtual classroom visits. I've made some like cool videos with Goldie Blocks. I think a few of the other panelists have made videos of Goldie Blocks too, which is a YouTube series for kids. So there's been some cool opportunities like that have come along as well. That it's been a really fun year for outreach.
Yeah, same here. 2020 and 2021 has been really interesting. It started with the introduction of like this app called Nepris. Did a lot of different sessions with them, and I know a lot of us have. And then I started doing stuff with organizations like COSI, which is a museum in Columbus, Ohio. And then it started like really getting into the weeds of a lot of local Midwestern primarily, but some Southern schools, just kind of exposing specifically a lot of young Black students to STEM. We have done panels together, Dr. Grady and I, through STEMming While Black, and others through some incredible people who are getting really to the core of what this whole AAAS IFTHN initiative is about, which is connecting people to the truth about STEM, that we are all different people. We all have all different backgrounds, and we're all relevant in this space. We don't have to be one thing or another. We all have a place in it without defining ourselves or aligning with exactly who we need to. Like, it's that whole thing. So it's been pretty incredible, and I've been really fortunate to be here with you.
I can't remember if I was next. I'll jump in. Okay. I would say my outreach has tended to focus around portrayals of scientists in the media. And so at Google, I was working volunteer with a team called the Computer Science and Media team. And part of it, I got to appear on camera again, which was a nice blending of my two worlds. But it was also like advising writers and producers of kids shows. Like, they'd say, hey, we really want to write about coding, but we don't know anything about coding. And Google would say, no worries, we'll send you some engineers. They can advise on the script. They can help you write something or like get some ideas. And so that was a really lovely way to kind of blend my previous background with what I'm doing now. And then another way through the ambassadorship that we've been able to do that is, as Gracie mentioned, things like Goldie Blocks. I know a lot of ambassadors have been on Mission Unstoppable. And we also all participated in what's called the If Then Collection, which ifthencollection.org, to do a plug, where there are a bunch of assets, videos and photos of us that are made available to museums and schools and educational institutions to try to show more diversity in what a scientist actually looks like and the kinds of sciences that kids can get involved in. And that's been a really cool thing to be a part of, just to know that those images are available now and can get out there to teachers and educators.
And most of my outreach efforts have been covered by what the other ladies on this call have said. So ditto, +1, etc. I will just talk about a side project that I have now, though, and I'm working on, started working on mid last year and will finish hopefully sometime this year, which is a couple of children's books about women in STEM and Blacks in STEM that I find personally inspiring. You know, growing up, my parents forced me to read books about African Americans and Africans in STEM. I grew up in Indiana. Not a lot of people who looked at me look like me. Certainly not a lot of people who look like me in STEM. So my parents like forced me to read these very boring books. And so now I'm writing hopefully more exciting children's books that feature really powerful people in STEM.
Very nice. Those boring books paid off because it sounds like you learned a lot, and there are not a lot of images or when we were growing up of, you know, Black people doing things. So I think that was great and affirming. So now we're going to take questions from the audience. So you all can continue to add to the Wahoo app. I will check them, but I'm going to start in the chat with the first question from Gabriella, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name, but the question is, how do we build that strong mentor network? And any of you can answer this question.
Mentoring is one of my favorite subjects, so I'm just going to jump in first. And I actually think of it and have since just out of undergrad is building my own personal board of directors. And so if you think about a company or a nonprofit, when they build a board of directors, they're very intentional about who are, you know, what are the types of skill sets that we need on a board of directors and how do we meet with them on a regular basis. And so I do that with my mentors, because then it's a lot lower engagement for each individual person, which makes it, I think, more manageable for them at least. And I think about, you know, who do I want to advise me on technical skills or on leadership skills or on speaking skills or, you know, religious things that I'm dealing with, and how often do I want to reach out? Is it, you know, some people it's once a month, once a week. Other people it's once a year. I send an email or try to touch base once a year. So for me, it's really trying to build a personal board of directors and just being really intentional about maintaining those relationships.
I have I guess my main experience of this was acting, because your network is so much of what matters. And I had a great experience when I first moved to LA, which is I reached out to the Yale Career Network because I just thought, let me see if I can find anybody who can give me some ideas of how this town works. And I remember sitting down with a producer and he said, okay, who do we know who went to Yale who's in Hollywood? And I was like, well, I have a friend who graduated 2 years ago. And he goes, no. Meryl Streep went to Yale. Jodie Foster went to Yale. And I was kind of like, yeah, but they're never going to talk to me. And he was like, you don't know that. Why are you saying no to yourself? And so I ended up going through the career network and finding, like, I mean, big names, right? Finding an email address, finding their agent's contact, finding whoever, and just writing an email and saying, I'd love your advice. I'd love to hear more about your journey. And I was shocked at the people who replied. So like Tony Shalhoub wrote me a card and said, I'll take you to breakfast. Like, you know, I had meetings with some high producers in Hollywood. It was a little early in my career to be able to like do that much with it, but it was still like just so lovely and reaffirming to realize that people wanted to help. And so in terms of like finding your mentoring network, you may not be able to find a mentor this way, somebody who would have a lot of time to spend with you. But if there's somebody you admire in tech, or somebody who's had a career that you think is really inspirational to you, or somebody who's doing something in a field that you really want to know more about, find them on LinkedIn, find them through any kind of public directory you can find on the internet, and send them a note. Like, they won't, I guarantee you, they won't feel bothered by somebody saying like, I really admire you and I'd love if you have time to know more about your story. I guarantee you it's not going to be a problem. In the worst case, they just won't have time to get back to you. So I would say be bold and you know, in reaching out to people who you want to connect with.
I would also add, I need to take Kim and Afua's advice on this for sure. I like really need to, I'm still working on, building that mentor network, but, and it's been hard, it's like hard I think it's just a hard thing to do. And so what I've also thought about is going the other way as well and trying to make it easier for others. And so, no matter where you are in your career path, or if you're still in school, like there's always someone that you can offer mentorship to as well. So being open to that idea and looking for ways you can contribute to people and lift people up who are a few steps behind you, I think is also really empowering. Like it's reassuring to remember that you have things to share with other people that are worth them knowing. And then also just helping people along the way is, I think, just a good thing in general for all of us to be doing. So
Yeah, and everything that they said is spot on. I mean, especially what Kim said. I literally was reading a book in a class and I could not understand what this book was actually trying to say. And instead of going to the professor, I said, you know what, I'm just going to see if this person who wrote this book is on LinkedIn and I'm going to message him. And sure enough, I messaged that person, and with great joy, we had an entire exchange about what that book meant. And it is something to be said that people are looking for your feedback. People are looking for that connection. They're not necessarily opposed to it. I think that we just assume that they may be. And so just be bold and reach out to someone and start a conversation, especially if you're just being human when you do it, and say, hey, I read this, or I know this, or I have a question. Would you be willing to answer? And I think more often than not, you'll find that people are willing to do that.
All right. So in the interest of time, I will ask coming up, if you keep everyone will just be mindful of the time. We have 2 more questions I'd like us to get to. The next question is, what obstacles did you face when transitioning into a STEM career? And so anyone can start off with this. Anyone? Gracie, let's start with you.
okay. So I didn't learn to code until college and never ever considered a technology career before college. And so the biggest obstacle for me, and continues to be, is just, what everyone has already touched on, is just not thinking that I know enough, and thinking that I don't have, I thought you had to be like someone who had built computers and had played video games their whole life to like then work in tech, which I know now is not a necessary connection or interest hobby set to have. But yeah, so that's definitely continues to be a challenge for me, just remembering that.
I would say being afraid to break things was one of the biggest obstacles I had early on, because I didn't want to change a single line of code unless I understood the entire file and every other file it was connected to. And so starting to develop the faith and okay, well, sometimes you just got to black box things, and sometimes you just got to go, well, I wrote the tests and I think it works, so I'm going to take the jump. But I think that was really hard for me, especially because I started out in Google and ads, and so the stakes were high. But yeah, I would say a fear of breaking things, and it's something you kind of have to get over in order to innovate and move forwards.
Thank you. And that question was from Katrina in the audience. And this next question, I think, is very important, is from Stephanie. She says, for women that have commitments to family that cannot relocate for a job, how can they find remote opportunities, or is there a best way to bring it up to employers that they would like to work remotely? And so anyone can address this question, but I think it's very important.
I think that landscape is changing, and I don't think anybody knows what it's going to look like. So, some companies have already announced, I think Facebook announced they want to be all remote by 2030 or something, and Google's going to do 3 days on, 2 days off when we go back. And I just think nobody knows what the future of technology work looks like, because companies have discovered, oh, people can work from home, but should they be working from home? So, but I do think that even before the pandemic, there were a lot of remote only opportunities. And so I think it's just a matter of looking online and figuring out what job hubs sort of list those. So.
Yeah. And there is some, like Angel Co is one for startup based, companies, if you are interested in startup stuff, where they're almost always remote. You can literally look on Indeed right now and look up remote only options, and you'll find a bunch of listings. But I think you're spot on. I don't know that this goes back to us being in the offices. I don't see how we convert back, because now you have people who are listen, they don't want to go back. So I think that you might find there to be a bit of resistance, and because that's where the market is going, you may not see the same resistance that you saw.
All right, and we have another question. This will be our last one from Jenny. She says, how do you express when you're feeling undervalued?
I would say when you're feeling undervalued, I think this is in part where it's really important to have a good mentor network to just do some validation for people who have known you for some time and can speak to sort of, you have a track record of success, you have a track record of figuring things out and doing that. I think when you do feel undervalued, it's really important to try and express that, explicitly often to your manager of saying, I feel like I've contributed in this way. Are you also seeing this? Do you give feedback in a different way, and sort of get to the heart of the issue if it's how you need to hear feedback, if it is whether or not your work is actually meeting your manager's expectations. I have certainly been in situations where I've seen people sort of spin out and where they don't feel valued. And so they start, just engaging in more toxic behaviors. Don't do that. Talk to your mentors, talk to your friends, and try to have really explicit conversations about what types of feedback signals you need in order to make sure that your value is recognized. And if it's not, start looking for a new job. And that is a perfectly fine option. Leaving because you don't feel valued or you aren't valued is a perfectly fine and acceptable option.
And I'm going to stop right there because our time is almost up. We have 1 minute left. And ladies, how can they continue to connect with you? Tell us your social media handle and what platforms you're on. We'll start with Gracie, Nicole, Kim, and Afua.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Gracie Ermey. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn, just Gracie Ermey. I'm the only Gracie Ermey, I think. So yeah, find me there.
Yeah, I like Twitter. So Think Then Build is where you can pretty much catch me. You can DM me directly, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm one of a million, Nicole Jackson. So just look for the Houston, Columbus, because that's, a super common name. It's not my.
I'm on Instagram as stage2 STEM, and I don't post as often as I should. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, and I don't think there are a whole lot of Kim Sweenens out there either, so you should be able to find me.
I am active on Twitter at Afua_Bruce. I'm apparently not the only Afua Bruce. Afua Bruce is taken. Afua_Bruce is me. I am also on, although not active really, on Instagram, same handle, Afua_Bruce.
Awesome. And if you're looking for me, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, everything at Dr. Day. And we want to thank you all so much for joining us today. We are your AAAS If Then ambassadors, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future and hope you got some nugget today from our amazing panelists. And we hope you have a great day and weekend. Thank you so much for joining us.